The Chargers are gearing up to play the Raiders on Sunday at home. With a difficult stretch of games to end the season, what do the Chargers need to do and change in order to make a playoff push in 2025? Let's get into it. All right, so we're into part 2 of our "What Needs to Change" series in regards to what the Chargers need to do in order for them to make a playoff push in 2025. There's a gauntlet of games here coming up for the last stretch of the season and coming off the bye week. Got the Raiders this week, Eagles next on Monday Night Football. Got to go to Kansas City, got to go to Dallas, going to host Houston at home with a flex game at some point for Week 17, and then you got the Denver Broncos at Mile High to finish the season. And all these teams outside of the Raiders are playing pretty good football at this particular stretch and point in time. So, what do the Chargers need to do to change their, I guess you can say, fortune in 2025? Because again, there are some issues we've underscored all year. The pod has been breaking down all the issues and all the woes and things that need to pivot in order for them to have success and better success. You know, you dealt with a bad hand and losing, some of your star players, your stalwart from Pro Bowl tackles on both sides. You lost one of your primary running backs. It's a myriad of things, and some others, I guess you can say, reserve or role players that have been hurt as well throughout the season. So it's been a lot. It's been trials and tribulations, but I do believe that going forward in this Jacksonville game that we played 2 weeks ago, what kind of reared its ugly head about these things that are lingering that the coaches haven't addressed. So in part 2 in this particular series about what the coaches need to do, what the philosophies they need to change, we're going to cover. On Monday, we covered what the players need to do, how we need to manipulate and shift the O-line around a little bit to get the best out of that group from what you have. You got to work with what you got. We did talk about that. We talked about the D-line. So now we're going to talk about the coaching staff and primarily the main guys, the offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and the head coach. What they need to do and what they need to change and how they need to quote unquote pivot their mindset in order for them to be able to be successful, because there is I guess you can say a book out on this team at this moment. Teams have gotten a bead on what the Chargers like to do. I mean, let's just be honest about it. It shouldn't be a secret at this point that NFL teams, NFL coaches watch film, they dissect, they drill down, they get down to the microscopic level of what your tendencies are, what your weaknesses are, the full Monty. So you have to be able to pivot and change your mindset in a sense and do things a little bit differently to keep having success as the season goes on. So let's talk about what the Chargers coaching staff needs to do to get to that point. So we're going to start with Greg Roman. What they need to do differently. We're going to start with the OC because, I think that his particular, I guess you can say, shortcomings or things that have been exposed up to this point, need some retooling, need some tweaking. So, what does our offensive coordinator need to do differently in this last stretch of games? Like I said, we're talking 6 games left. And what he needs to do differently in these 6 games in order for him to be able to have this offense still moving and putting up points and being competitive in these games. So for starters, I think that he understands that he realizes, and I think he realizes it from week 1, but he didn't verbally say it obviously because he didn't want the cat out the bag. But it's apparent at this particular point in time that without Joe Alden and Rashawn Slater, this team does not run the ball well. And it's weird to say that losing 2 tackles would completely and utterly change and flip the idea of them being able to run the ball, right? But I think that is the biggest problem, and having Bradley Bozeman and Zion Johnson there for their run blocking ability in as their strength, and they're not producing, as well as Mekhi Becton, and they're not producing. You see the staunch difference in the ability to run the ball downhill. What they did last season when they first got here, what they're doing this year is completely, utterly, totally different. And the commonality and difference is the tackles. And I think he knew that from game one. Even with Joe Alt still being out there for game one, he knew this run defense was different. I mean, excuse me, this run offense was different. Their ability to run the ball was different. And he, has been trying his best to get some juice out of the run game. And I think with having Amarion Hampton there for that stint, he was still able to get, movement because he's such a big, powerful back. But now that he's been out, you've seen the idea of them not being able to run the ball like they did last year. Now, fingers crossed, Amarion Hampton will be back this week. Worst case scenario, the week after that against Philly. But you're looking at two fronts that are not going to give you anything, for these next 2 weeks. So I think he needs to organize the O line, like I talked about on Monday, and get the best run blocking unit out there and run behind those blockers. If your interior, O line, the center guard combo is the guys that you can run behind those guys. Don't waste time trying to run behind the tackle that can't run block. Or don't run behind the center that can't. Whoever you deem the weakest links on this particular O line, don't waste your time trying to be cute and run behind these guys when you can't get anything going. That stalls drives, and that allows for defense to put us behind the sticks and get us off the field and put our defense back on the field, which, we've seen that if they're not on the field for a large stretch, they're more effective. But the longer they're on the field, they wear down and they give up points. And if you can't match that energy, that's where things go left. They go sideways. So organize and run behind the best blockers that you have. That's primary focus number one. You got to do that. I think that's one thing that he has to understand, that whatever that combination is, figuring that out, and the Raiders game will probably be the best time to figure that out, because they will play you tough, but they have their own issues on the other side. That they're going to be the easiest game that you have going forward. So I would say that you're going to try anything now against a different team, try it against the Raiders. And I talked about, the different combinations of O-line in my Monday video about how you could honestly, reshape this line and maybe get the best out of it. So I would try those particular avenues in practice and, maybe early in the game to see if you can't get things going downhill. Because you got to have a run game to take the pressure off Justin Herbert, because you can't have him sit back there throwing the ball 30, 40 times a game with this per section. You just can't. You just can't. You're going to roll the dice one too many times to come up snake eyes. I mean, let's just be honest about it. So you have to be able to ultimately figure out how to run the ball to take the pressure off the pass game. You got to be able to do that. Then on top of that, become more diverse in your running and passing schemes. The idea of you lining up in power and, running the ball, to the strong side of the formation doesn't always work. Defenses get paid too. Coordinators and coaches get paid too. If they see you lining up with 3 tight ends and the tight ends are all to the wide side of the field, like the likelihood they feel like you're going to run to that side. You're not going to run backside to the weak side of the O-line. You're going to run strong side. I'm going to load up the box and put as many bodies over there as I can to stretch it out and not let you get downhill. So you got to be more savvy in that space. Spreading the ball out, going 3 wide receivers, going 10 and 11 personnel when you got 3 or 4 wide receivers on the field, or 3 receivers in the tight end and only 1 back. Make them cover the entire sideline of the entire 50 yards of the field. And then if you spread those guys out, you get less people in the box, and then you can run downhill in the interior. Do things like that, but don't just make it completely utterly predictable what you want to do. Now, I've seen you do certain things in the space where you come out in those 13 personnel with those 3 tight ends and things of that nature, and you ultimately have you throw to the one receiver out there or the one tight end that you like to target. Gaskins will be on the field, and maybe Quentin Johnson or Ladd McConkey will be the other receiver, and you'll play action and throw to those guys. But there's a limited fashion. You literally got 2 guys running against a 7-man secondary in certain cases. So I don't know. I mean, again, it still doesn't leave for a lot of nuance, is my point. So you have to do that. So, get some nuances in the run game, do some spread formations and things of that nature, kind of, get the defense on its heels, and, run more quick, passing games. You started to do more screens before this bye week, do more screens with Ladd and Quentin to get them in space. Hopefully Amarion comes back and, get him out there in space and throw some screens to him, let him get downfield and use that big frame to break tackles. So, do some more quick passing games to keep the ball out, get the ball out of Justin's hands quick and move the sticks. I think that's another thing he should address as well. Be more diverse in that and let people ultimately, add to the repertoire that you have, so they have to worry about more. Because, from a coaching perspective, if I can coach against 30 plays versus 60 plays, I feel better about myself. If I don't have to worry about 30 plays, then guess what? I feel good going into my game plan. But if there's 60 plays I have to cover, that's a way more sleepless nights. So if you have more schematic plays that will work and get this defense moving around and get them guessing, that will allow you to go back to your core plays. But if you don't, then guess what? They're going to scheme against those core plays. You shut those down, and guess what? You have a tough time moving the football. So you got to be more diverse. And that leads to our next point about opening up the playbook. We're having more quick hitting plays. Those screens, those quick shuffle passes, things of that nature. Get the ball out, get the sticks, move it to second and third and short, and allow for you to be able to pick up easy first downs. Just don't, I'll absolutely positively live in second and long and third and long, because that's when the pass rush is going to heat up and get to you. And in facing these teams with the Max Crosbys of the world and your Jalen Carters and Jalen Phillipses and Chris Jones, Quentin Williams. I mean, it goes on and on. It doesn't get any better. So you have to open up and get more quick hitting plays and get the ball moving downhill and get those short yardage moments on second and third down. And finally, be better off script and in-game adjustments, because I feel like he's really good on script. And in games which we've lost, I'm going to point out that his script doesn't work early. He has a real tough time pivoting from that. I think that's the problem. He has to be able to pivot off his script, and when his script is not working, and go to something different. That leads to the idea of having in-game adjustments. If my 20 plays that I have scripted for the first few drives does not work, they take that away. I got to be able to pivot to something different. I got to have something in my bag to get the ball moving. Because if I don't get the ball moving, it's going to stymie the offense, frustrate your quarterback, and people are going to start to get in disbelief. So you have to be able to be better off scripting in your in-game adjustments. Even at half. Coming out of half, you got to be better, because I've not seen him come out and have the best halves after a struggling first quarter, in the space. If you struggle in the first quarter, they struggle all game. Good teams get better at half. They do. And you have to be one of those teams going forward. If you can't get that done, I think you need to consider a switch at the end of the season, because that's the issue. That's going to keep you in the same cycle. You may make the playoffs, you may not, but guess what? After that, it's pretty much over, because everybody's geared up to what you like to do, and they have you backed into a corner. So I think that's what Greg Roman needs to focus on, and hopefully he can ultimately, do some of these things at least to allow the offense to keep flowing, because you have the weapons. You just have to be able to use them in the manner that you can use them, in my opinion. So moving down the line, let's talk about Jesse Minter. Jesse Minter, he's gotten exposed in the Jacksonville game. Honestly, he got exposed in the Tampa game last year and the Jacksonville game this year. And the commonality is Leon Coleman. I talked about this last week, and I'm talking about it again. He has a black eye on his resume from Leon Coleman. And I will promise you this, and I'll go back to my saying about the coaches dissecting film. They're going to look at this film and look at it with a microscope. You hear me? I mean, we're talking zooming into the grain of it to understand how to figure out Jesse Minter's scheme and what he likes to do. That film is going to be used against you as a top order in this particular list, what he needs to do differently. That's going to be used against you. So you're going to have to pivot and start to do things differently from your schematic perspective. You have to implement some other things, some other calls, some other protections, some other alignments, some other fronts to be able to be diverse, because you start going back to the well and doing what you did against Jacksonville, teams going forward are going to see that, and they're going to know exactly what to do against it. They're going to know exactly what to do against it. And what I talked about in my video on Monday about how moving your D lineman around, your best D lineman around, will help you, because if you line up Tierra Tart and Jamar Caldwell in the same spot every down, they're going to run away from them. Point blank. Prime example, and if you have Naquan Jones and Bud Dupree on the weak side of the line, the quarterback's going to come to the line, because the offensive coordinator is going to tell him in his ear, say, hey, if Naquan Jones and Bud Dupree are on your left side, flip the play, run it to their side. Do not run it Tierra Tart and Jamar Caldwell, because they're their best run defenders. And they're always in the same spot. That's going to be easy money for them to do. Easy work. It's brainless activity to know that 48 and Naquan Jones are on this left side, and I'm going to run on that side, not the right side. Plain and simple. But if you move those guys around and you can't always pinpoint where they are in that 40-second play clock, guess what? You'll have a better ability to stop the run. But you have to do that, because those are your best run defenders. The guys that aren't your best run defender, if they get ran at, they're gonna have successful games. And I promise you that Bud Dupree shouldn't be on this field much at all. You should play Tuli and Khalil Mack, especially on early first and second downs or high run percentage downs. Have them on the field because they're your best run defenders on the edge. And you move, mix and match, and move around your best interior guys. If you don't, they're going to pinpoint who's weak and they're going to run at them every single time. So you got to be diverse and more cleaner with that scheme. You got to switch that up because they're going to pinpoint that. In all honesty, you have to do that, and you have to be more savvy and more aggressive with your coverages. You have to marry your fronts up with your coverages and what you like to do and what you want to take away. Because the middle of the field is vulnerable with outside of Dayon being in the middle. So that's the issue. You kind of got to mix and match and maybe drop some guys in coverage. If you have Bud Dupree on the field, you can line him up at defensive tackle if you think it's a RPO situation, and drop him in the coverage a few times over the middle to get in the way of those passing lanes and those quick passes. Because if you call playoff coverage, those slants and those quick outs and quick routes are going to be available to you. If they want to throw them, if you got a body in 6'4" frame in them way, because you did this a couple of times on the goal line, you do that more, then that will disrupt the timing and get them off schedule. But that's the only way I would use Bud Dupree. Outside of that, I wouldn't use him much, in my personal opinion. I would use my guys that I know they're going to be every down players is going to produce for me. And only use Adafe and Bud and all those guys, in pass protection, long pass protection downs only. Third and long, second and long, where you need to get after the passer. Outside of that, have a better, more stout run front, in my opinion, because that's going to allow for them to be frustrated with the idea that their run game is not working. And they're going to pass the ball more, which is going to play into your schematic hands. But you got to get there. Because if you don't stop the run early, you're going to stick with it, and you're going to have a long day at office. So you got to be more diverse than that, and got to be much cleaner in your schemes. You got to be, I want to see perfect, damn near perfect, but you got to be, tight and concise with your schemes. Because if you don't, because let's be real, Jesse Minter's claim to fame is the schematic calls. If he does not scheme up properly and put guys in the exact right position to make plays, that's when things fall apart, because we just don't have the stout, defenses from top to bottom that Seattle and Broncos and Dallas and the Eagles have. You don't have everybody that's a superstar on this team that can make plays just by lining up. You got to be able to be schematically sound to get things going. So he has to be clean and damn near perfect with schematics when it comes down to what he calls. If he doesn't, that's when things are going to fall apart. And you can't afford to be predictable. You can't afford to be predictable. You can't afford predictability. At all costs, you cannot afford it. If you are predictable in any space, any time, based upon what they've seen up to this point through 12 weeks, you're going to struggle, because they're going to know what to call. Like I said, they're going to dissect that film from the Jacksonville game and say that they like to do this, this, and this, on this, and this down. And guess what? We're going to run this, and this, and it's going to work. Fine, let's play. So that's what makes you going to struggle. So that's my critique on Jesse Minter. So he's going to have his work cut out for him going forward. But I'm not saying it's impossible, but he just has to be smart and savvy, which I think he can do, in order for his play calls for the next 6 games, for sure, starting with the Raiders. And lastly, Jim Harbaugh. Not much on him, because I think he needs to focus more so on just the inner workings and being a general of this team. But there are some critiques here that I have that he needs to fix and needs to correct going into the last part of the season. So first and foremost, I think his primary focus needs to be schedule and motivation. I think he needs to keep the team on schedule, in practice and on game days. Get everybody ready and up to task to play. Keep the players engaged and motivating them to play. I think that's what his claim to fame is. I think he needs to really lean into that and keep guys motivated. It's a long season. You kind of get lulls into the season where guys kind of lose that fire. You got to reinvigorate and keep lighting it up. You got to pour gas on it, light that match, and keep it going, because that's going to ultimately, be the difference maker in some games. If they don't have that fire, that passion, and that drive in certain spaces or certain games, like that Jacksonville game, that's when you have outings like you had. So he has to be able to motivate these guys, keep them engaged, and keep them ready to play, and keep them on schedule. If he does all that, I think that, coupled with his offensive and defensive coordinator changes, they'll have success and they can win these games in the next 6. If they don't, we're going to be crying wolf at the end of the season, to be honest. So that's my critiques. Those are my things that I think they need to change ultimately. And hopefully, they can get things done and have a good week against the Raiders and build on that and going into the Eagles game on Monday night. So if you're looking for the Lecture Shop podcast any space, anytime, hit me up. Drop a subscribe on the channel. Hit the subscribe button on the channel. Let the YouTube algorithm know we're doing big things out here. Hit me up on any of my social media channels. I can be reaching any space and time: Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter. Any facet, any social media platform that you use. As always, we drop content practically every day on this channel, Monday through Friday. So hit us up, drop a comment, let us know how you feel about the vibes, and we'll be back on Friday with a game preview, man. But in the meantime, between time, I'm your boy Coach Divas, and you always got to do one thing and one thing well. You always got to remember,